This is Haunted Fears, and tonight, you and the Haunted Fears horror family are going to hear some of the most disturbing experiences ever whispered out of the Arizona night in a video titled 5 Most Disturbing True Arizona Horror Stories. From lonely stretches of I-17 where truckers swear something walks the shoulder, to trailer parks on the edge of Tucson where the walls are too thin to hide what your neighbor is really doing, these accounts will pull you into the kind of moments most people spend their whole lives trying to forget. As you listen, you might recognize a road you've driven, a parking lot you've crossed alone, or a mountain range you've admired from a safe distance, and realize you never really knew what was waiting out there after dark. So, dim the lights, put your headphones on, and join the Haunted Fears horror family as you lean in just a little closer. If you make it to the end, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who thinks they're not afraid of the dark. Because after this, Arizona may never feel the same again. My name is Logan Carter, and I've been driving trucks up and down I-17 between Phoenix and Flagstaff since I was 21. What I saw on that highway one monsoon night still makes me check my mirrors more than I should. I was 29 when it happened, 8 years deep into the long-haul life, and I thought I knew every curve, every exit, and every trick the desert could throw at me. The night runs were my specialty. Less traffic, cooler air, and the kind of quiet that lets you think or shut your brain off completely, whichever you need more. That particular night in late July, I got a dispatch call around 11 for an urgent load out of Flagstaff. Medical supplies headed to a facility in Phoenix with a tight morning delivery window. No room for delays. I signed the papers at the dock, did my walk-around, checked my digital logbook, and rolled out just after midnight. The monsoon clouds were already stacking up by the time I merged onto southbound I-17. You could feel the weight of the storm in the air, that electric heaviness that makes your skin prickle. I cracked open an energy drink, poured some coffee from my thermos, and flipped through my usual rotation of podcasts and radio stations before settling on a true crime show. The kind of background noise that keeps you alert without demanding too much attention. The wipers were going full speed within 20 minutes. Rain came in waves, light drizzle that let you see the road clearly, then sudden sheets of water that turned your windshield into a gray wall. I dropped my speed, flicked on the hazards during the worst patches, and kept both hands locked on the wheel. Hydroplaning was a real risk on those steep downhill grades, and I'd seen too many trucks in the ditch to get careless. It was around 2 in the morning when I first saw her. Or it, or whatever the hell it was. I was coming down one of the long descents, wipers beating steady, when my headlights caught something on the right shoulder. A figure, slim, pale, wearing something white or light-colored. It stood perfectly still facing the road, maybe 10 feet from the guardrail. My first thought was stranded motorist. Flat tire, dead battery, one of those nightmare breakdowns you hear about. But something felt off. The posture was too rigid. No waving, no movement at all, just standing there in the rain like a statue. I didn't slow down. You don't stop on I-17 at 2 in the morning unless it's an emergency, and even then you pull way off and keep your doors locked. I passed the figure in half a second, and it vanished into my mirrors. I turned the radio down. Told myself I was tired. Told myself it was a reflective mile marker or some trick of the rain and the lights. 5 miles later, I saw it again. Same side of the road. Same slim silhouette in white. Same unnatural stillness. This time it was closer to the shoulder edge, right up near the barrier. And as my high beams swept over it, I swear the head tilted. Not like someone turning to look, like a neck bending at an angle that shouldn't be possible. I felt my stomach tighten. My hands were slick on the wheel. I checked the speedometer. 62, steady, safe. I glanced at the dashcam preview screen mounted on my dash. The figure should have been visible in the frame for a second as I passed, but all I saw was a white smear, like someone had smudged Windex across the lens. Static. Nothing solid. I looked back through the windshield, clear as day. There it was, shrinking in my side mirror, standing in the rain. The CB radio crackled. I reached over and turned up the volume, expecting the usual chatter, trucker banter, weather updates. But instead, I heard a voice I didn't recognize. Low, flat, almost bored. "You seeing someone walking that shoulder tonight, driver?" I didn't answer. My mouth went dry. No one followed up. Just static and silence. I switched channels. Nothing. Switched back. Dead air. I passed a runaway truck ramp, then another steep grade. The rain eased up a little, just enough that I could see further ahead. My coffee was cold. My hands ached from gripping the wheel too hard. And then I saw it a third time. This time it was right up against the barrier, close enough that I could make out more detail. White dress or gown, soaked through and clinging, hair plastered to the face. And that head tilted at that same impossible angle, like the spine was broken, like it was tracking me, watching every truck that passed. I tried to rationalize it, tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, too many hours on the road, too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But I've been tired before. I've driven 30-hour shifts. I know what fatigue hallucinations feel like, and this wasn't that. This was solid. This was real. The weather started to clear after the next few miles. The rain thinned to a drizzle, and the clouds broke enough that I could see stars between the gaps. My headlights cut clean lines across the asphalt. The road ahead was empty. No taillights, no oncoming traffic. Just me and the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump of the wipers. And then, directly in my lane, she was standing there, not on the shoulder, not near the barrier, right in the center of the lane, dead ahead, maybe 50 yards out and closing fast. My high beams lit her up like a spotlight. White gown, torn and stained, hair hanging in wet ropes across her face. And her head. God, her head was wrenched to the side, chin almost touching her shoulder, neck bent at a 90-degree angle like she'd been in a car wreck and never healed. But it was her eyes that made my blood stop. They caught the light like an animal's. Two bright reflective discs in a face that was too pale, too wrong, too smeared, like someone had taken a photo of a person and dragged it sideways in Photoshop. I slammed the brakes. The ABS kicked in, juddering through the pedal, and the whole truck shuddered and swayed. I hit the horn. A long, desperate blast. My tires screamed. I fought the wheel as the trailer started to swing, the back end threatening to jackknife. The load shifted. I felt the chassis tilt. For a second, I thought I was going over. And then, just as suddenly, the truck straightened out and slowed. I came to a stop at an angle across both lanes, engine still running, hazard lights flashing, heart trying to punch its way out of my chest. I looked ahead. The road was empty. I sat there, breathing hard, hands shaking so bad I had to grip the wheel just to keep them still. I checked the side mirrors. Nothing. Checked the rear view. And that's when I saw her again, just for a second. Standing directly behind the truck, centered in the lane, her body overexposed in the reflection of my taillights. Head still twisted, eyes still glowing. And then I blinked, adjusted the mirror a half inch, and she was gone. I didn't stop again until I hit the next rest area 20 miles south. I pulled into the lot, put the truck in park, and sat there with the engine idling for 10 minutes before I trusted my legs enough to get out. There were 2 other trucks parked in the far corner. I walked to the restroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stood there gripping the sink, staring at my reflection. When I came back out, one of the other drivers was standing by his rig, smoking a cigarette. Older guy, maybe late 50s, weathered face, trucker cap pulled low. He nodded at me. I nodded back. "Rough night?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Something like that." He took a drag, exhaled slow. "You come down from Flagstaff?" "Yeah." He nodded again like that explained everything. "You finally saw her then." I didn't ask what he meant. Didn't need to. He flicked his cigarette into the dirt and climbed back into his cab without another word. When I got home the next morning, I pulled the dashcam footage. I scrubbed through every timestamp where I'd seen her, and every single time all I got was white static, a smeared blur, nothing that looked even remotely human. But I know what I saw. I know what was standing in that lane. I still drive I-17. It's my route. It's my job. But when I hit that stretch between Flagstaff and Black Canyon City, I slow down. I turn off the radio. I keep my eyes locked straight ahead, and I don't look at the shoulder. Not anymore. Because some nights, when the rain is coming down and the road is empty, I still catch movement in my peripheral vision. A pale shape. A figure in white. And I know if I look directly at it, if I let myself see it clearly, I might not make it home at all. My name is Melissa Grayson, and for 3 years, I lived in a rundown trailer park on the edge of Tucson with my 7-year-old son. I thought the worst thing about that place was the rent being late every month, but I was wrong. I was 34, working night shifts at a diner off the highway, barely scraping by after a divorce that left me with more bills than I knew how to handle. The trailer park wasn't much, but it was all I could afford. Gravel lots, rusted chain-link fences, a handful of trailers with peeling paint and sagging porches. The kind of place where nobody asks questions and everyone minds their own business because they've got problems of their own. The walls were thin as paper. You could hear everything. Dogs barking at 3 in the morning, couples fighting, kids running around during the day, their mothers yelling from doorways. Trains rattled past in the distance every few hours. Sometimes at night, you'd hear what sounded like gunshots, but it was probably fireworks. Probably. The swamp cooler on our roof hummed all summer long, struggling to keep the heat from turning the inside of our trailer into an oven. The trailer next to ours had been occupied by a loud family with too many kids and a car that never started. They moved out suddenly one weekend in early June. No notice, no goodbye, just gone. For a couple of weeks, the place sat empty, curtains drawn, porch light burned out. Then one afternoon, I came home from a morning shift and saw an old pickup truck parked in the gravel next to it. No moving van, no boxes, just a man, maybe mid-40s, average height, thinning hair, wearing jeans and a faded flannel shirt. He was unloading a few duffel bags and a folding chair. That was it. I waved from my car. He glanced at me, gave the smallest nod, and went back to what he was doing. No smile, no introduction, just a flat acknowledgement that I existed. I told myself he was shy, or tired, or just wanted to be left alone. Fine by me. I had enough on my plate. My son started talking about him a week later. He'd just turned 7, and he had the kind of imagination that turned every shadow into a monster, and every noise into a ghost. One morning before school, he was sitting at the table with his cereal, and he looked at me with those big, serious eyes and said, "Mom, I think there's a monster in the trailer next door." I barely looked up from my coffee. "What makes you think that?" "I saw him through the window last night. He was dragging something on the floor, something big." I sighed. "Honey, that's just the new neighbor. He probably moved furniture." But it looked like a person. It wasn't. "You were half asleep. Go brush your teeth." He didn't bring it up again for a few days, but I started noticing things. Not because I believed him, because the sounds were hard to ignore. I worked late most nights, didn't get home until 2 or 3 in the morning, and that's when it was quietest in the park. Everyone asleep. No cars. Just the hum of coolers and the occasional dog. But from the trailer next door, I started hearing things. Dragging sounds. Heavy, rhythmic, like someone pulling a rolled-up rug across a floor. Then a thud. Then silence. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like muffled coughing or choking, but it would cut off so suddenly that I'd wonder if I imagined it. And then there were the smells, metallic and sharp, like rust or old blood mixed with something chemical. Bleach, maybe, or ammonia, strong enough that I could smell it through my kitchen window if the wind was right. I saw him take his trash out a few times, always late at night, Always black garbage bags and always heavy. He'd carry them with both hands, shoulders straining, and toss them into the dumpster at the edge of the lot. Flies gathered around his bins during the day, thick clouds of them. I tried not to think about it. I had my own problems. Rent was overdue again. My ex was threatening to file for custody. I couldn't afford to get involved in someone else's business, especially if it turned out to be nothing. But my son kept drawing pictures. Dark, crayon-heavy images of a tall figure with long arms dragging stick people across the floor, red streaks trailing behind them. I asked him why he kept drawing that. He said he saw it through his bedroom window at night when he couldn't sleep. I told him to stop looking. I moved his bed away from the window. I closed the blinds, but I couldn't stop hearing it. The dragging, the thuds, the smell getting worse. One night, I came home later than usual, almost 4 in the morning. The diner had been slammed, and then I'd had to wait for my tips to get counted out. The parking area was empty except for a couple of beat-up sedans and his truck. The air was cool and dusty, and everything was quiet. I parked, grabbed my purse, and started walking toward my trailer. That's when I noticed his porch light was off, but there was a dim yellow glow coming from behind the curtains, and his door was open, not wide, just a few inches. Enough that I could hear something inside. Scuffing, movement. I should have kept walking. I should have gone straight home, locked my door, and minded my own business like everyone else in that park. But I slowed down. I don't know why. Curiosity. Fear. Something. I angled myself so I could see through the gap in the door as I passed, and I saw him. He was crouched on the floor, both hands gripping someone's wrists, pulling them across the linoleum. I couldn't see the face, just long hair, matted and dark, trailing behind. One bare foot, the other wearing a sneaker. The body was limp, completely limp, and as he dragged it toward the back of the trailer, one hand slipped free and fell onto the threshold, fingers twitching once before he grabbed it again and yanked it back inside. That's when he looked up. Our eyes met, just for a second, maybe less. His face was calm, blank, like he was doing something as routine as taking out the trash. No panic. No anger, just acknowledgement. He saw me, and I saw him. And then I turned and walked as fast as I could without running, my keys shaking in my hand, my breath coming in short bursts. I got inside my trailer, locked the door, checked on my son. He was asleep, his blankets tangled around his legs, his face peaceful. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, listening. I heard the scuffing stop. I heard his door close. I heard his truck start up an hour later and pull out of the lot. I didn't sleep. I sat there until the sun came up, and then I drove to a gas station and used the payphone. I didn't give my name. I just said there were strange smells and noises coming from a trailer in the park, and that I thought something violent might be happening. The operator asked for details. I gave the address and hung up. 2 days later, the police came. Not just patrol cars. Unmarked sedans, vans, people in gloves and plastic suits. They stretched yellow tape across his porch and went in and out for hours. The whole park came outside to watch. People whispered. Rumors started immediately. Some said they found bodies. Some said it was a false alarm. Some said he'd been running drugs or cooking meth or hiding someone. Nobody knew for sure. The landlord wouldn't say anything. The news didn't cover it. Just a quiet investigation that ended as suddenly as it started. He never came back. His truck was gone. His trailer was cleared out within the week, and someone else moved in a month later like nothing had ever happened. But my son asked me about it one morning while we were packing to leave. We'd found a cheaper place closer to my work, farther from the park, and I was relieved to go. He looked up at me while taping a box shut and said, "Mom, where did the man who dragged people go?" I didn't know how to answer that. I still don't. We moved out, and I thought that would be the end of it. But I can't stop thinking about that night, about how long I waited before I made the call, about whether someone could have been saved if I'd acted sooner, about how many times I heard those sounds and told myself it was nothing because I was too scared, too tired, too broke to get involved. Now, whenever I'm in a place with thin walls, I listen. I can't help it. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear it again. That dragging sound. That heavy rhythmic pull of something being moved across a floor. And I have to remind myself that I don't live there anymore. That I'm somewhere else now, somewhere safer. But the truth is, I don't think I'll ever stop listening. I don't think I'll ever stop wondering what I could have done differently. And I don't think I'll ever forget the way he looked at me through that doorway, calm and cold, like he knew I wouldn't say a word. My name is Jason Qureshi, and this happened when I was a 22-year-old student at Arizona State who thought he knew the Superstition Mountains better than he really did. I learned the hard way that some places don't forgive overconfidence, and some trails are designed to make sure you never find your way back. I was an engineering major at the time, deep into my junior year at ASU, spending most of my weekends either buried in textbooks or trying to get outside before the Arizona summer turned everything into an oven. I wasn't what you'd call an expert hiker, but I'd done enough trails around Phoenix, Tempe, and South Mountain to feel like I had a handle on things. I watched YouTube videos about gear and safety. I downloaded all trails and saved a dozen routes. I read blog posts about the best overlooks and secret spots. I thought that made me prepared. I thought wrong. A group of us from campus decided to hit the Superstition Mountains on a Saturday in late April. The weather was perfect. Not too hot yet, and the desert was still green from the spring rains. We planned it out over group chat the night before. Meet up at 10, drive out together, hike one of the popular loops, take some photos for Instagram, catch the sunset from a ridge, and head back before it got too dark. Simple. Low stakes. The kind of thing college kids do every weekend without a second thought. We left Tempe around 10 in the morning in 2 cars, 4 of us total. I rode shotgun, windows down, music playing, everyone in a good mood. The drive out took a little over an hour. The closer we got to the mountains, the more the landscape changed. Saguaro cacti standing like sentries, red rock formations jutting out of the desert floor. The Superstitions rose up ahead of us, jagged and ancient, their peaks cutting sharp lines against the sky. I remember thinking they looked bigger than I expected, more remote, more serious. We parked at the trailhead around 11:30. There were a handful of other cars in the lot, which made me feel better. Other people were out here. We weren't alone. We grabbed our packs, filled our water bottles at the spigot near the lot, and started up the trail. The first hour was textbook. Wide, well-marked path. Plenty of other hikers passing by, some coming down already. Sweaty and tired, but smiling. We stopped every 15 or 20 minutes to take pictures. Pose shots with the cacti. Candid shots of the view. The kind of content that gets decent likes, but doesn't really capture how hot it was or how quickly the sun can drain you out here. By noon, we were a few miles in, and the group hit a fork in the trail. The main path stayed on the ridge, winding along the top with open views. The other path, narrower and less traveled, cut down into a canyon. I noticed it because it looked more interesting, better angles for photos, more dramatic. My phone's GPS showed it looping back to the main trail within a mile, maybe less. I figured I could take the side route, get some shots, and catch up with everyone in 20 minutes. I told them my plan. One of them shrugged. Another said, "Don't get lost," as a joke. They kept moving, and I split off. The side trail started out fine. It was narrower, yeah, but still clear enough. There were cairns every 100 feet or so, those little stacks of rocks that hikers leave to mark the way. But the further I went, the less frequent they became. And the ones I did see started to look strange. Too neat, too deliberate. One of them was arranged in a tight spiral, stones decreasing in size as they wound inward. Another was stacked almost 3 feet high, perfectly balanced, like someone had spent an hour making sure it wouldn't fall. I stopped and crouched down next to one of them. The stones were smooth, sun-bleached, arranged with a kind of care that felt intentional, ritualistic, almost. I took a picture of it and kept moving, telling myself it was just some bored hiker with too much time on their hands. That's when I started noticing the GPS acting weird. The little blue dot that represented my position kept drifting off the trail line on my screen, then snapping back, then drifting again. I figured it was the canyon walls interfering with the signal. Happens all the time in terrain like this. I wasn't worried. I could still see the trail ahead of me. I kept walking. And then I heard my name. It was faint, like someone calling from a long way off. I stopped and turned around. Nothing behind me but rocks and dry brush and the empty trail. I called back. My voice echoed off the canyon walls and died. No answer. I kept walking, assuming it was one of my friends, that maybe they'd doubled back to check on me. But then I heard it again, and this time it was coming from a completely different direction. Off to my left, somewhere up on the ridge above me. I looked up and scanned the rocks. Nothing. No movement. No person. I pulled out my phone. No signal. The GPS was frozen on a blank gray screen. The little loading circle just spun and spun. I tried to retrace my steps, turning back the way I came, but the trail didn't look the same anymore. The cairns I'd passed were gone, or at least I couldn't find them. The rocks all looked identical. I told myself to stay calm. I'd done enough reading to know the basics. Follow the canyon downhill. Gravity is reliable. If I kept going down, I'd eventually hit a wash, a road, some kind of landmark. But I kept hearing things. Footsteps. Not mine. Offset from my own rhythm by just a beat or two, like someone was walking 20 feet behind me, matching my pace. I'd stop, and everything would go silent. Dead quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Then I'd start walking again, and within a few seconds I'd hear it. Pebbles sliding, a boot scuffing rock, the faint crunch of gravel under weight. I stopped again and shouted, "Hey, if someone's there, just say something." Nothing. I kept walking, faster now, my heart rate climbing. And that's when the whistling started. Low and tuneless, like someone humming a melody they barely remembered. It drifted down from above, then shifted to my right, then seemed to come from behind me. Never close enough to pinpoint, never loud enough to be sure it was real, just there. Persistent. Mocking. The sun started dropping faster than I thought it would. The shadows stretched long and sharp across the canyon floor, and the light turned everything orange and purple. I realized I'd been walking for over an hour with no sign of the main trail, no sign of my friends, no sign of anything familiar. My water bottle was half empty. My phone was useless, and I was still hearing footsteps. I turned on my headlamp as the last bit of daylight bled out of the sky. The beam cut through the blue-gray dusk and lit up the trail ahead. Except it wasn't a trail anymore. It was a sheer drop, a cliff edge, 30, maybe 40 feet down onto a field of jagged rocks and boulders. I stopped so fast I almost went over. My boot knocked a loose stone off the edge, and I watched it tumble and bounce and finally disappear into the shadows below. And right there, less than 2 feet from the drop, was a cairn. A large one, stones stacked waist-high, perfectly balanced, like someone had built it as a warning, or a marker, or bait. I backed away, pulse hammering, and turned in the opposite direction. I didn't have a plan anymore. I just moved. Fast. Reckless. My headlamp bounced wildly, throwing shadows that looked like figures, shapes that moved when I wasn't looking directly at them. The whistling got louder. The footsteps matched my pace. And then I started hearing laughter, faint and cruel and echoing off the rocks like it was coming from everywhere at once. I saw movement on the ridges above me. Dark silhouettes, human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too tall or too still, or positioned in places no person should be able to stand. They'd flicker into view at the edge of my light and vanish the second I turned to face them. Then the stones started falling, small ones at first, pinging off the rocks around me, then bigger ones, landing close enough that I felt the impact through the ground. Not falling, thrown. I started running. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I just wanted out. My lungs burned. My legs shook. My hands were torn up from catching myself on rocks I couldn't see. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like forever. It felt like no time at all. And then I saw it. A dirt road. Flat and wide and undeniably real. I stumbled onto it and collapsed onto my knees, gasping, covered in dust and sweat and blood from a dozen cuts I didn't remember getting. I sat there in the dirt for 10 minutes, maybe longer, trying to catch my breath and convince myself I was actually out. Then I saw headlights. An old pickup truck, faded blue paint, engine rattling, came down the road and slowed to a stop. The driver was an older man, maybe 65, with a lined face and a flannel shirt and a baseball cap pulled low. He looked at me through the open window with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not surprised, just tired. "You all right, son?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was. "Got yourself lost, huh?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly, like he'd heard it before. "Mountains will do that, especially these ones. You're lucky you made it out." "I thought I knew the trail," I said, my voice hoarse. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Those mountains don't like letting people go once they get turned around. You're not the first to wander off, and you won't be the last." He gave me a ride back to the trailhead. My friends were still there, leaning against one of the cars, annoyed but not worried. They asked where I'd been. I told them I got turned around and my phone died. They accepted it without question. We drove back to Tempe, and I didn't say another word the whole way, but when I got home that night, I couldn't let it go. I opened my laptop and started searching. Missing hikers, Superstition mountains, disappearances, unsolved cases. There were dozens. People who'd gone out for a day hike and never came back. Searchers who found their gear, but no bodies. Reports of voices calling from ridges. Cairns in places they shouldn't be. Witnesses who swore they saw figures moving on the peaks, only to find nothing when they climbed up to check. I don't hike alone anymore. I don't go to the Superstitions at all, but sometimes, when I'm driving east out of Tempe and those mountains come into view on the horizon, I feel it again. That weight. That presence. Like something up there remembers me. Like it's watching to see if I'll come back. And I know, deep in my gut, that I didn't escape because I was smart or lucky. I escaped because whatever was out there decided to let me go. And I'm never going to test whether it'll make that choice again. My name is Hina Raza, and I work night shifts as a nurse in Phoenix, the kind of schedule that makes parking lots feel a lot scarier than they should. What I kept seeing in mine, though, wasn't just fear. It was something that shouldn't have been there at all. I was 27 when it started, about 2 years deep into working at one of the big hospitals in downtown Phoenix. The job wasn't glamorous. 12-hour shifts, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 or 4 nights a week, depending on how desperately short-staffed we were. I'd taken the night shift because the pay differential was significantly better than days, and because, honestly, I didn't have much of a social life to sacrifice anyway. My friends from college had all moved on to normal 9 to 5 schedules, weekend brunches, and group chats I could never keep up with because I was either working or dead asleep while they were living their lives. Night shift nursing is a different world. You see things during those hours that don't happen in daylight. Patients coding at 3 in the morning. Family members who have been sitting in waiting rooms for 6 hours finally breaking down in tears. Doctors barking orders while I'm elbow deep in trying to start an IV on a patient whose veins have collapsed from dehydration or drug use or just bad luck. By the time 7 a.m. rolled around and I clocked out, I was so exhausted that I moved on autopilot. All I wanted was to get to my car, drive the 15 minutes to my apartment, and collapse into bed with the blackout curtains drawn and the AC on full blast. The apartment complex I lived in wasn't anything special. It was one of those mid-range places you find all over Phoenix, built in the early 2000s, stucco exterior painted in shades of beige and tan that blend into the desert, gated entry with a key fob system that half the residence propped open with a rock anyway, covered parking on the ground level, open spots on the second floor that no one wanted because the Arizona sun turned your car into an oven within an hour. I always parked in the covered section, same general area every time, because I'm a creature of habit and because I didn't want to deal with the steering wheel hot enough to burn my hands. The lighting in the lot was inconsistent. Some fixtures worked fine. Others flickered like they were about to give up. There were blind spots everywhere, long shadows between rows of cars, corners near the stairwells where the light didn't quite reach. Security cameras were mounted on poles here and there, those black dome things that are supposed to make you feel safer, but mostly just make you wonder if anyone's actually watching the footage or if it's all just for show. It was late June when I first saw her, about 3 weeks into a particularly brutal stretch of shifts where we were running on skeleton crews and everyone was burned out. I just finished a shift that had been worse than usual. We'd lost a patient, a guy in his early 40s who'd come in with chest pain and coded 20 minutes later. We'd worked on him for over half an hour. It didn't matter. When you lose someone like that, someone young, someone who walked in on their own 2 feet, it stays with you. The whole unit was rattled. Nobody talked much after that. We just finished our charting, gave report to the day shift, and got out. I clocked out around 7:30 in the morning, still in my scrubs. My hair pulled back in a bun that had come half undone somewhere around hour 9. I grabbed my bag from my locker, walked through the empty lobby, and pushed through the side exit that led to the employee parking area. The air outside was already starting to heat up. Phoenix in the summer doesn't cool down much at night, and by sunrise it's already climbing back toward triple digits. I could feel the dry heat settling on my skin as I crossed the street toward the structure. I was halfway to my car when I noticed her. A woman, probably late 20s or early 30s, standing between 2 rows of parked cars about 30 feet ahead of me. She was wearing jeans and a light-colored jacket, cream or beige, and her dark hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. She looked like she was waiting for something, or someone. Her posture was stiff, her hands clasped in front of her, her head turning slightly as if scanning the lot. I slowed my pace a little, cautious but not alarmed. It wasn't unusual to see people in the parking structure at odd hours. This was a hospital. Visitors came and went at all times. Maybe she'd forgotten where she parked. Maybe she was waiting for a ride. I kept walking, keys already in my hand, planning to just pass by and mind my own business. But as I got closer, she turned toward me. Her face was pale, her expression tight with something that looked like anxiety or confusion. She took a step in my direction and spoke. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was soft, polite, but there was something flat about it. Rehearsed. "Have you seen a silver sedan? I'm supposed to meet someone, but I can't find the car." I stopped a few feet away from her, weighing my options. I was tired. I wanted to go home. But she seemed harmless, just lost or confused. I shook my head. "Sorry, I haven't seen anyone. Are you okay?" "I just need to make a call," she said, her eyes fixed on me. "Do you have a phone I could borrow, just for a minute?" I hesitated. I had my phone in my bag, but something about the way she asked felt wrong, too scripted, like she'd said it 100 times before. I told her I was really tired and needed to get home, that maybe she could go inside the hospital lobby and ask someone there. She nodded slowly, didn't argue, just stood there watching me as I walked past her to my car. I unlocked the door, climbed in, locked it immediately, and sat there for a few seconds with my hands on the steering wheel. My heart was beating a little faster than it should have been. I didn't know why. She hadn't done anything threatening, hadn't even raised her voice, but something about the interaction left me uneasy. I started the car and drove home, trying to shake the feeling. By the time I got to my apartment, I'd already half forgotten about it. 4 days later, it happened again. Same shift pattern, same exhaustion, same walk through the lobby and out to the parking structure. And there she was, Same woman, same spot. Same jeans, same jacket, same ponytail. Same anxious look on her face. And when she saw me, she turned and said the exact same thing. "Excuse me, have you seen a silver sedan? I'm supposed to meet someone, but I can't find the car." I stopped dead in my tracks. My brain scrambled to process what I was seeing. It was her. The same woman from 4 nights ago, wearing the same clothes, standing in the same place, saying the same words in the same tone. "Do I know you?" I asked. She blinked at me, tilted her head slightly, like she didn't understand the question. "We talked before," I said. "A few nights ago, right here." She just stared at me. No recognition, no reaction, just that same flat, anxious expression. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the heat. I didn't say anything else. I just walked past her, faster this time, got in my car, locked the doors, and left. The whole drive home, I kept replaying it in my head. Same woman, same words, same everything. It didn't make sense. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had some kind of mental health issue. Maybe she hung around the hospital because she felt safe there. Maybe she genuinely didn't remember me. People do weird things. Brains do weird things. I told myself it was nothing, but it kept happening. Not every shift, but often enough that I started to expect it. I'd walk out into the lot and scan the rows of cars, and more often than not, she'd be there. Same spot, same outfit, same words, every single time. Like she was reading from a script she couldn't deviate from. And every time I saw her, the wrongness of it got stronger. The way she moved was too smooth. The way her voice never changed pitch or speed. The way her eyes seemed to look at me but not quite see me. I mentioned it to one of the other nurses during a break one night. I said, "There's this woman in the parking lot I keep seeing. She always asks me the same question. It's really strange." My co-worker, an older woman named Linda, who'd been working nights for over 15 years, just shrugged. "Probably mentally ill. Lots of people hang around hospitals. As long as she's not bothering you, just ignore her." I tried. I really did. But ignoring her became harder when I started noticing other things. Like the way her jacket never had any dirt on it, even though the parking structure was filthy with dust and oil stains. Or the way she never seemed to sweat, even when the temperature was pushing 100 degrees before the sun was fully up. Or the way, when I walked past her one morning and glanced back over my shoulder, she was gone. Not walking away, just gone. Like she'd never been there at all. One morning, about 3 weeks after the first time I'd seen her, I came out to the lot after a particularly brutal shift. We'd been slammed all night, back-to-back traumas. I was running on fumes, barely able to keep my eyes open. I saw her standing in her usual spot, and this time I was too exhausted to feel anything but irritation. She turned toward me as I approached, opened her mouth to speak, and I heard the words before she even said them. "Excuse me, have you seen a silver sedan?" But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. Her mouth was moving, but the sound was delayed. Just by a fraction of a second. Like watching a video with the audio slightly out of sync. I stopped walking and stared at her. She stared back, waiting for a response. I didn't give her one. I just walked past her, my pulse hammering in my ears. When I got to my car, I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the rearview mirror out of habit, checking the back seat like I always did before starting the engine. And that's when I saw her, not behind my car. In the reflection, she was standing off to the left near a concrete pillar, angled away from me. But when I turned to look through the actual windshield, she was directly in front of me, facing me, exactly where she'd been a second ago. I blinked, looked at the mirror again. The reflection didn't match. She was in 2 places at once, or the mirror was showing me something that wasn't real, or I was losing my mind. I started the car and drove out of there so fast I almost clipped another vehicle on the way out. That afternoon, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through everything in my head, trying to make sense of it. Finally, around 2 p.m., I gave up, got dressed, and went down to the building manager's office. I told him I'd been seeing someone in the parking lot multiple times, always in the same area, and I wanted to know if anyone else had reported it. He said no. I asked if he could check the security footage. He sighed, clearly annoyed, but agreed. 2 days later, he called me and asked me to come back down. He had his laptop open on his desk, the security feed pulled up. He showed me the timestamps I'd given him. I watched the grainy footage of myself walking through the lot. I watched myself stop. I watched myself stand there, clearly speaking to someone. But in the video, I was completely alone. There was no woman. Just me, talking to empty air. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, looking at me with something between concern and suspicion. "Night shift can mess with your head." I didn't respond. I just left. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew she was real, even if the cameras couldn't see her. I started asking around at work, casual questions during breaks. Had anyone heard about anything strange happening near the hospital? Any missing persons cases? Anything unusual? Most people brushed me off. But one of the ER techs, a guy who'd been there for over a decade, perked up when I mentioned the parking structure. "There was a girl," he said, "few years back. Went missing from one of the apartment complexes near here. She'd been out with friends, said her boyfriend was picking her up, but she never made it home. They found her car in a parking garage a couple blocks from here. No signs of a struggle, no witnesses, no body, just gone." "What did she look like?" I asked. He pulled out his phone and found an old news article. He showed me the photo. It was her. Same face, same hair, same jacket. I felt the room tilt. Her name was in the article, but I'm not going to say it here. It doesn't feel right. After that, I started paying even closer attention. I realized she only appeared on certain mornings, when the lot was nearly empty, when I was alone, and she was always standing in the same spot, near the same row of cars. I started to wonder if that was where it had happened, where she'd been taken, where she'd died, where she'd been waiting ever since. One morning in late August, after another endless shift, I walked out into the lot and saw her standing there. The sun was already brutal, the air shimmering with heat. The lot was empty except for my car and 2 others. She turned toward me, opened her mouth to speak, and I cut her off. "I know who you are," I said, my voice shaking. "I know what happened to you." She stopped. Her mouth closed. For the first time since I'd started seeing her, her expression changed. She looked confused, lost, scared. "I'm so sorry," I said, tears filling my eyes. "I'm sorry no one helped you. I'm sorry you're still here." She stared at me for a long time, and then, in a voice that was softer and clearer than I'd ever heard from her, she said, "I can't find him." I wiped my eyes. "I don't know where he is, but you don't have to keep looking." She looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something human in her face, something breaking. And then she turned and walked toward the far end of the lot, toward the stairwell. And when she reached the shadows, she disappeared. Not slowly, just gone. I stood there in the heat, shaking, crying, and I didn't move for a long time. I haven't seen her since that day. But I'm different now. I check my backseat every time before I get in my car. I never walk through that lot without scanning every corner. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm too tired to think, I glance in my rearview mirror and swear I see her sitting behind me. But when I turn around, there's nothing there. I don't know if I helped her. I don't know if she's at peace. But I think about her constantly. I think about how many people walked past her and never saw her, how many times she asked for help and got nothing back, and I think about how close I came to being just another person who ignored her. And I wonder how many others are out there, stuck in loops they can't escape, asking questions no one hears, waiting for someone to finally listen. My name is Omar Castillo, and for a few years I volunteered with a small search and rescue group near the Arizona-Mexico border. What we found out there in the desert one afternoon made me realize that some places hold more than just heat and silence. They hold something that watches and waits and remembers every single person who dares to pass through. I was 31 at the time, working part-time as a translator for immigration services in Tucson, and spending most of my weekends with a non-profit humanitarian organization that operated in the brutal, unforgiving stretches of Sonoran desert south of the city, where the border runs through some of the most remote and deadly terrain in North America. Our mission was simple on paper, but devastating in practice. We'd load up trucks before dawn, drive for hours on dirt roads that barely qualified as roads at all, and hike deep into areas where migrants were known to cross on foot after being dropped off miles from any town or checkpoint. We left gallon jugs of water at predetermined GPS coordinates. We marked trails with reflective tape. We documented signs of recent crossings. And we searched for anyone who might be lost, injured, dying, or already dead and waiting to be found. The Sonoran Desert is one of the most hostile environments you can imagine. During the summer months, daytime temperatures regularly climb past 115 degrees. The ground gets so hot it can burn through the soles of cheap shoes in hours. At night, especially in the cooler months, temperatures can plummet to 50 degrees or lower, and if you're not prepared, hypothermia becomes a very real threat. Dehydration can kill you in 6 hours if you're moving in the heat without water. Heat stroke can take you even faster. Add in rattlesnakes, scorpions, flash floods that turn dry washes into roaring rivers in minutes, and the constant looming threat of violence from cartel scouts and smugglers who don't appreciate witnesses. And you understand why this corridor has one of the highest migrant death tolls in the country. I'd been volunteering with the group for a little over 2 years when this happened. Long enough to know the land, long enough to recognize the difference between a trail that's weeks old and one that was used in the last 24 hours, between animal tracks and the distinctive pattern of worn-out sneakers or boots, between belongings that were abandoned and belongings that were taken by force. Long enough to understand the unspoken rules that kept us as safe as we could be out there. You didn't wander into certain areas without radioing your position to someone back in town. You kept your distance when you saw Border Patrol vehicles and didn't ask questions. You absolutely did not engage if you saw men on ridges with binoculars or radios, because those were cartel lookouts, and the best thing you could do was document their position, report it later, and get out of their line of sight as fast as possible. The group I worked with was small, maybe a dozen active volunteers at any given time, but we never went out in large numbers. It was always teams of 3 or 4, just enough to cover ground safely and carry the supplies we needed. On this particular run, in early September, there were 3 of us. Myself, a woman in her mid-40s, who'd been doing this kind of work for nearly a decade, and who we all just called by her first initial because she preferred it that way, and a younger guy, maybe 24 or 25, who'd only been out with us a handful of times and was still learning how to read the desert and when to trust his instincts. We'd planned a loop through a corridor that had seen heavy traffic the previous month, based on reports from other groups and from Border Patrol logs that got leaked to us through back channels. Our goal was to replenish water at several marked drop points, check a few sheltered washes where people sometimes waited out the worst heat of the day, and do a sweep for anyone who might be in trouble. We left Tucson just before 5 in the morning, while the sky was still dark and the stars were just beginning to fade. We drove south on paved state highways until those gave way to county roads, and then to dirt tracks that were barely maintained, full of ruts and rocks that made the truck shake and rattle with every turn. By the time we parked at our staging point and started pulling on our packs, the sun was just starting to break the horizon, flooding the desert with that particular kind of light that's soft and golden for about 20 minutes before it turns harsh and blinding. Each of us carried a 40-pound pack, extra water for ourselves, because you never cut corners on hydration. a first aid kit stocked with bandages, tourniquets, snakebite supplies, and electrolyte packets, emergency Mylar blankets, protein bars, and jerky, a handheld radio, a GPS unit with all our waypoints preloaded, and a satellite phone, because cell service out there was non-existent, and if something went seriously wrong, that phone was the only way we were getting help. The plan was to hike an 8-mile loop, hit our checkpoints, and be back at the truck by mid-afternoon, well before the heat became dangerous, even for people who knew what they were doing. The landscape we moved through was stark and almost alien in its emptiness. Endless fields of creosote bushes that smelled sharp and medicinal when you brushed against them. Towering ocotillo plants with their long, spiny limbs reaching up like skeletal fingers. Forests of cholla cactus that looked soft and fuzzy from a distance, but would embed thousands of barbed spines in your skin if you got too close. Prickly pear sprawling low to the ground. Jagged black volcanic rock that could slice open your hand if you tried to catch yourself during a fall. Dry arroyos cutting through the hard-packed dirt, their sandy bottoms marked with the tracks of coyotes, javelinas, and the occasional mountain lion. And every so often, rising above it all, a massive saguaro cactus, arms stretched wide, standing alone like a monument to endurance. But more than the natural landscape, what you notice out there is the evidence of human passage. It's everywhere. Plastic water bottles, hundreds of them, scattered along trails and washes, left behind because carrying empty weight is a luxury no one can afford. Backpacks torn open by animals, or discarded when they became too heavy. Clothing, shirts, jackets, jeans, hung on branches as trail markers, or abandoned when the heat made wearing them unbearable. Shoes, always shoes, because feet blister and swell and cheap sneakers fall apart after days of walking on rocks and thorns. And then there are the shrines, small wooden crosses hammered into the dirt, names painted or scratched onto them in Spanish, plastic flowers that have been bleached white by the sun, candles melted into shapeless puddles of wax, photographs sealed in plastic bags, faces smiling out at you from another lifetime. Every single one marking a place where someone's journey ended. Every single one a life that ran out of water, or time, or luck. We were about 2 hours into the hike, maybe 4.5 miles from where we'd parked the truck, when we started seeing things that felt wrong. The first was a pile of shoes arranged on top of a large flat rock. Not scattered, not dropped. Arranged. There were at least 15 pairs, maybe more, all lined up in neat rows, like someone had taken the time to organize them by size. They were old, sun-cracked, falling apart at the seams, caked in dust and dirt, but the arrangement itself was deliberate and careful, intentional in a way that made my skin crawl. The younger guy stopped walking and just stared. "What the hell is that supposed to be?" Our team leader didn't answer right away. She walked up to the rock slowly, crouched down, and studied the display from a few different angles without touching anything. Her jaw was tight. Could be a memorial. People leave offerings sometimes. Could be cartel. Sometimes they mark territory in weird ways. Or it could be something else, I said. She looked at me. Like what? I didn't have an answer. She pulled out her phone, took a series of photographs, logged the GPS coordinates, and stood up. We document and keep moving. We did, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. About half a mile further down the trail, we found another arrangement. This one was even stranger. Personal items, identity cards, Mexican and Guatemalan, rosaries with wooden and plastic beads, a small stuffed bear with one button eye missing, a wallet with family photos still tucked inside, a child's crayon drawing folded into a square, all of it laid out on the ground in a perfect spiral. Smooth stones, each about the size of a fist, were placed around the edges like a border. It looked ritualistic. It looked like an altar, and none of the items were weathered. They hadn't been there long. "This doesn't make any sense," the leader said quietly, more to herself than to us. "People don't do this out here. There's no reason to." "Maybe someone's trying to send a message," I offered, though I didn't believe my own words. Messages in the desert get sent in other ways. This felt different. This felt like something else entirely. We took more photos, logged the coordinates, and kept hiking. But now all three of us were tense. We stopped talking except to point out landmarks or confirm directions. And every few hundred yards, we'd see something new. Footprints in the sand that led into a dry wash, and then just stopped, as if whoever made them had simply vanished into thin air. A ring of stones surrounding a pile of ash that was still faintly warm to the touch when I knelt down and put my hand near it. A long strip of cloth, dark red or brown, tied to the branch of a mesquite tree and fluttering in the wind like a flag. And then finally, we saw the figures. They were standing on a ridge, maybe half a mile away, overlooking the valley we were walking through. At first, I thought they were other hikers, or maybe Border Patrol agents doing a sweep of the area, but they didn't move. Not even a little. They just stood there, 3 or 4 silhouettes, perfectly still against the bright sky, facing in our direction. "You see that?" I asked, stopping in my tracks. The leader pulled out her binoculars and looked for a long time without saying anything. When she finally lowered them, her face was unreadable. "I can't tell what they are. They could be people, they could be... I don't know. They're not moving at all." "We should turn around," the younger guy said, and his voice was shaking. "This whole thing feels wrong. We should go back." "We have one more checkpoint," the leader said firmly. "One more water drop. It's just over that ridge. 15 minutes, maybe 20. Then we turn around and head straight back to the truck." We kept moving, faster now, and all three of us kept looking back over our shoulders. The figures on the ridge stayed exactly where they were, but the feeling of being watched, of being tracked and studied and marked, grew stronger with every step. My heart was pounding harder than it should have been, and it wasn't just from the heat or the pace. We reached the final checkpoint, a narrow wash with a scraggly mesquite tree providing a few feet of shade. And that's when we found the pit. It was dug into the side of the wash, shallow but deliberate, maybe 2 feet deep and 3 feet across. And inside it were remains. Not a full skeleton. Pieces. Bones that looked human. Femurs, ribs, what might have been part of a skull, but arranged in ways that didn't make anatomical sense. Mixed in with them were animal bones, bird feathers still attached to tiny skulls, bundles of dried plants tied with string, scraps of cloth, and stones painted with symbols. Didn't recognize. The smell was faint, but unmistakable. Old death, decomposition, and something else underneath it. Something sharp and chemical, like burnt plastic or hair. "Oh my God," the younger guy whispered, backing away so fast he almost tripped. The leader pulled out her phone with steady hands and started taking pictures from multiple angles, her face grim. "We report this immediately. This isn't something we handle ourselves." I was about to agree when I heard it. A low, clear whistle, 3 notes, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere behind us. I spun around and looked toward the ridge where the figures had been standing. They were gone. "We're leaving," I said, louder than I meant to. "Right now." Nobody argued. We turned and started moving back the way we'd come, not quite running, but close to it, our packs bouncing against our backs, sweat pouring down our faces. The sun was starting its descent, and the shadows were stretching longer and darker across the desert floor. And I kept hearing things. Footsteps crunching on gravel behind us that would stop the instant we stopped. Rocks tumbling down hillsides when there was no wind to move them. That same 3-note whistle, sometimes distant, sometimes so close, it sounded like it was right next to my ear. Once, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a dark shape on a ridge to our left that disappeared the second I turned my head to look at it directly. By the time we reached the truck, the sun was low on the horizon, and the sky was turning deep purple. We threw our packs into the bed of the truck, climbed inside, slammed the doors, and locked them. For a solid minute, we just sat there, breathing hard, saying nothing, staring out at the desert that suddenly felt like it was staring back. The leader tried the handheld radio first. Nothing but static. She tried her cell phone. No signal, as expected. Finally, she pulled out the satellite phone and made the call. The voice on the other end was calm, detached, bureaucratic. They'd send a team to check the coordinates we'd given. They'd follow up with us. They thanked us for the report and told us to drive safely. We drove back in silence, the desert turning from purple to black around us, and I kept my eyes on the side mirror, half expecting to see headlights following us or figures running alongside the truck in the dark. But there was nothing, just empty road and endless suffocating night. 2 days later, the leader got a call. The authorities had sent people out to check the site. They'd found remains, both human and animal, but the official report was vague and carefully worded. Possible cartel activity. Possible wildlife scavenging. Inconclusive. The area would continue to be monitored. They thanked us again for bringing it to their attention. But I know what we saw out there. I know what we felt. And I know that whatever exists in that stretch of desert, it isn't just cartel scouts watching for border patrol. It isn't just coyotes scavenging bodies. It's something that lives in the space between desperation and death. Something that feeds on the fear and suffering of people who have run out of options and run out of hope. Something that's been there longer than the fence, longer than the roads, maybe longer than any of us can imagine. And it's still there, waiting. I stopped volunteering in that zone entirely. I still do humanitarian work closer to Tucson, in areas that feel safer, but I will never go back to that corridor. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed trying to fall asleep, I hear it again. That 3-note whistle, faint and far away, like it's calling to me from across the miles, like it's reminding me that it saw me, that it knows my face, and that it's waiting to see if I'm foolish enough or broken enough to come back. I never will. If this story left you unsettled, you're not alone. The desert holds secrets that were never meant to be uncovered, and some truths are too heavy to carry alone. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories that walk the razor edge between reality and the unknown, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Haunted Fears, and join the Haunted Fears horror family. 'Cause out here in the dark, we're all just trying to make sense of the things that refuse to make sense. Stay safe out there.
This story, including the research script and editing, was completely created by me. Thank you for supporting original content.